But I think there are three drivers that, properly understood, can shed a lot of light on the situation. And those three would be ethnicity. Start with ethnicity. Well, obviously, in a lot of these kinds of... Now, the north of Sudan, ethnically Arabic, religiously Muslim, is one sort of solitude, which borders on the Red Sea. So you've got the Port Sudan up there, and you've got the capital city of Khartoum. The south of Sudan, which is ethnically black and religiously Christian, is yet another solitude. Those two actually didn't even come together until after independence, with some fairly catastrophic results. And then you've got Western Sudan, the Darfur, or the land of the Fur, where the Fur tribe, as well as the Masalit and the Zagawa live, as well as various Arab and affiliated nomadic tribes. Now, the Fur, the Masalit, and the Zagawa are ethnically black, religiously Muslim. Now, the ethnicity, the hatreds, are fostered by this.
Japan, tanya ketahui? Ha? Ha? Tanya ketahui enggak?
الاسم من أحمد محمد يعقوب. العمر 18 سنة. المهنة طالب مدرسة العباسية تقعي ثانوية بنين. لا كنت أنا في الدوام كنت أنا ما جاي خبر حتى يجي خشوا الناس جرت وأنا ما جاي خبر نايم ونوم غفرني لو بدك سامي البيت قاعدين جنب الديوان دي والله هم قاعدين بيتقايضوا لقيت رفعني مشين فوق هنا والله إنك رفعني في العربية وجاوني لهدي يوم الأول المسا بين المسا جانا تقونا مويو بين فينا ويونا تقونا.
On the UN base in Bor, among them women and children. Some have bullet wounds, others say they were attacked by people with machetes. This boy says he was beaten with sticks by a group numbering in the hundreds. This woman says she was told by her attackers to lie on the ground. She refused and tried to run away. They caught up with me, so I tried to jump over a wall. But one man caught up with me and hit me in the head with a machete and left me. I stayed very still because I didn't want them to come back and finish me. Another woman described being shot in the arm as she too tried to run away from her attackers. Still pictures emerged on Saturday of the aftermath of the violence. Some show the dead being carried in body bags and loaded onto trucks by UN staff. Others reveal the brutal nature of the attacks. In the morning, an armed mob rampaged through the protection of civilians area.
On December 21st, 2013, approximately 46 additional U.S. military personnel deployed by military aircraft to the area of Bor, South Sudan to conduct an operation to evacuate U.S. citizens and personnel. After the aircraft came under fire as they approached Bor, the operation was curtailed due to security considerations, and the aircraft and all military personnel on board departed South Sudan without completing the evacuation. The purpose of this operation was to protect U.S. citizens, personnel, and property. As I monitor the situation in South Sudan, I may take further action to support the security of U.S. citizens, personnel, and property, including our embassy in South Sudan. Now, of course, we know now that several U.S. citizens, Americans who were there in South Sudan working with the UN, were able to be evacuated today.
In recent weeks, rising violence and fighting have taken the lives of innocent civilians, men, women, and children. Heated rhetoric on both sides has raised the risk of war. So today I want to speak directly to you, the people of Sudan and South Sudan. In your lives, you've endured extraordinary hardship. So my message to you today is simple. It doesn't have to be this way. Conflict is not inevitable. You still have a choice. You still have a chance to avoid being dragged back into war, which only leads to one place: more suffering, more refugees, more death happen. The government of Sudan must stop its military actions, including aerial bombardments. It must give aid workers the access they need to save lives. And it must end its support for armed groups inside the South. Likewise, the government of South Sudan must end its support for armed groups inside Sudan, and it must cease its military actions across the border. The presidents of Sudan and South Sudan must have the courage to return to the table and negotiate and resolve these issues peacefully.
The International Criminal Court has filed genocide charges against the president of Sudan. The court accuses Omar al-Bashir of masterminding attempts to wipe out African tribes in Darfur with a campaign of murder, rape, and deportation.
We are charging al-Bashir with three counts of genocide, 5 of crime against humanity, and 2 of war crimes.
The court's prosecutor says al-Bashir's forces attacked a village, then put all the people who lived there in camps without food, water, or cattle. The prosecution also says there were rapes.
70-year-old women, 6-year-old girls are raped, massive rape.
Prosecutors at the world's first permanent global war crimes court have issued charges against a sitting head of state. Sunday, the country's information minister said that Sudan does not recognize the International Criminal Court and refuses to obey any decision or order it issues. An estimated 300,000 people have died in Darfur since conflict erupted. In 2003, local tribes took up arms against al-Bashir's Arab-dominated government in the capital, Khartoum, accusing authorities of years of neglect. Prosecutors say 2.5 million more people could die after being forced from their homes.
The international community failed in the past, failed to stop Rwanda genocide.
That's number one. Number two, now if the situation in Juba, in South Sudan was allowed to deteriorate, this could recreate conditions for LRA to return not only to South Sudan, but to Uganda. The same with ADF. This would also recreate conditions for ADF to come back and terrorize our people.
But the reason runs counter to earlier statements made by the army spokesperson.
The mission there is to evacuate stranded Ugandans, and this has been authorized by the government of South Sudan.
It became clear to us that there was a new process going on there. A group calling themselves the Sudan Liberation Army had attacked government installations, the forces in Darfur. And before we know where we were, there was a major conflagration going on. This had a huge effect on the peace process and the original plan to settle the historic conflicts. When I investigated what was going on in Darfur, it was clear that this wasn't just another one of the numerous insurgencies that was troubling this land, and indeed the continent, but there were some very special features to it. The special features were that the Sudan government, led by al-Bashir, was orchestrating a genocidal solution to the dissatisfaction of the people there. So we had targeted attacks by Sudanese military.
Centuries, Sudanese Arabs have been taking the black tribal people from Sudan as slaves for their personal use, as well as exporting them to the Middle East and beyond. Today, this practice continues under the approving eye of Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir.
The Sudanese military and its agents, militias that it armed, were the ones carrying out the slave raids, and they used government transport, a train, to help bring these troops in, and in some cases carry the slaves back.